Good evening, Erev Tov, and good day to all our friends wherever you are. My name is Ruby Shamir, and I'm the Executive Director of the America-Israel Friendship League in Israel. I'm happy to host you on this webinar, Advancing Women in Sports. The AFL is hosting webinars on different topics twice a week. We actually have hosted already over 70 webinars since COVID started. I'm happy to host you the fifth time under the umbrella of this series, Icons. Today, we are also partnering with Athena, the professional unit of the National Project for Advancement of Women in Sports in Israel. I would also like to mention the partnership between the International Women's Forum, IWF, and Athena in mentoring programs to advance women in sports. As an Israeli, I'm proud to mention the success of all these efforts. In the Olympic Games in 1972, Israel had 2 Israeli Olympic athletes participating. In 1992, we had 4 participating, and Yael Arad got the first Olympic medal in judo. In 2016, in Rio, we already had 25 women participating, which was 52% of the delegation. We are looking forward to Tokyo and hope to have more and more representatives, and also that they will win. Before I introduce our moderator, I would like to mention 2 more partners on this webinar. One is the Maccabi USA, and the other one is the Israeli Olympic Committee. Thank you all. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Meredith Jacobs, CEO of Jewish Women International. She's an award-winning journalist and best-selling author. Prior to joining JWI, Meredith served as editor-in-chief of Washington Jewish Week. She was recognized by the Jerusalem Post as one of the 50 most influential Jews of 2020. Meredith was among the participants in the 2019 AFL Women's Delegation. I wish you all enjoy, and Meredith, you're welcome to start.
Thank you, Ruby. You know, I am so excited about our conversation today and with this unbelievable panel. So I have to admit, I'm not an athlete, never was. I don't think I count my little Peloton treadmill training. But I think through the eyes of watching my son play lacrosse through middle school, through college, I really come to understand the discipline and drive it takes to compete at any level. But oh my goodness, what it takes for you all to have competed, whether it's Division I or at the International Olympic level, is beyond impressive and speaks so much about the kind of women you are. You know, as CEO of Jewish Women International, an organization that's dedicated to building equity and safety for women, I've come to see how female athletes are changing the game when it comes to pay and workplace equity and safety, and I'm in awe of your talent and work. So for those of you who are new to my organization, JWI, we are a 123-year-old women's organization with the mission to build a world in which all women may thrive. We work every day to end violence against women and girls, build access to long-term economic security, and connect highly accomplished women as mentors and role models to our next generation of women leaders. And I invite you all to learn more at jwi.org. So now I'm going to briefly introduce our inspiring panel. I recommend you going on the email that talked about this webinar to click on their bios and really learn everything. So we're going to start with Vered. Vered Buskila is a 3-time Olympic athlete. She's vice president of the Olympic Committee of Israel. This is a newly developed position aimed at establishing an infrastructure of resources for the benefit of Olympic sport in Israel. As an Olympic athlete, Vered competed in the 420 dinghy sailing and participated in Athens in 2004, Beijing 2008, and the London Games in 2012. Danielle Cantor-Jeweler, Executive Vice President and Partner of Fame, is an MBPA certified agent representing current and retired NBA talent. Danielle negotiates multi-million-dollar basketball contracts for a number of NBA players and has also negotiated a myriad of national and international athlete endorsement deals. She teaches classes in negotiations and management and entrepreneurship at the George Washington University Law School. And she's a member of the Leadership Council for Peace Players International, an organization using the power of sport to unite, educate, and inspire young people to create peace for those living in politically and socially conflicted communities. She's also an athlete, having played Division I soccer for the University of Pennsylvania, and is also one of JWI's former Women to Watch honorees. Andy Mures swam for Stanford University while earning a degree in human biology. She competed for Team USA in 2009-2013 Maccabi Games in Israel, and during the games, decided to make Aliyah and move to Israel to compete for the Israeli national team. In 2016, she competed in the Rio Olympics and was part of the first ever Israeli swimming relay for women. In 2017, she started studying medicine at Tel Aviv University, but has since taken a leave of absence from her medical training to train full-time for the upcoming Tokyo Games. Marav Oleniak is director of Athena, the National Center of Advancement of Women's Sports at the Wingate Institute in Israel. In addition to being a former swimmer and swim coach, she served on the executive committee of Israeli Water Polo Association, the Israeli Olympic Committee, and as a water polo commentator for television. And finally, Diana Redman is an Israeli soccer player who played as a defensive midfielder and has represented Israel at the international level. Here in the US, she played for the Houston Dash, and she's currently a clinical psychologist and sports psychologist who works with elite athletes in Los Angeles. Welcome all. Okay, let's get to it. Meredith, I want to start with you. What does it take to compete at an international level?
Wow, what a first question. I have to say, from my experience, I've always thought of myself as a mistake. For many, many years as a young girl, as a young athlete, I didn't really understand how come I was the one that got away, from all of my friends. All of us were dancers when we were very young, and I couldn't really understand the path or why I was the one that was the world champion in the age of 15, and then went to the first Olympic Games, and then did the 3 Olympic Games. I wasn't sure what exactly was different. And only when I became older, I realized that I thought of myself as a young girl that I wasn't very exceptional or didn't have any unique talent. And when I got older, I understood that my talent is a survival. I'm a survivor, I think. I think that even though I had not so easy circumstances, coming from a small city, from a traditional family, not a sport family at all. I was the only girl in the sailing club, so I had to travel a lot. And as a young girl, I never thought it's obstacles. It was so obvious for me and very natural for me to continue training and to continue doing the best I could do. And now I understand that this, I think this kind of character, it's a talent. It's not something that everyone has. So I think every sports, it's different, because I don't think I could ever be the world champion in running or in judo. I think I chose the only sport that I could be the best in the world. So it's kind of luck, and also many, I chose the sport every day. From a very, very young age, I chose it, and I didn't see any obstacles. I just kept going, and I just always wanted to do my best. So
I love when you said, I chose the sport every day. And I think that's what separates, that's what separates the ones who become the kind of players that you all are, is that you go after it day after day after day, and you push through the pain, and you find the way to juggle the schedule, and you do it. There's a commercial they play every year at the Olympics that always makes me cry, when they show, the parents getting up at 4 a.m. to drive the kids to the lessons, and then they just go, "Thank you, mom. Thank you, mom. Thank you." But I just want to cry. So
and the Thank You Mom campaign is amazing. But I think coming from a family that they always supported me at everything I did, but they never drove me, because a traditional family in Israel, Shishi, Shabbat, Friday and Saturday, you're off, So I had to kind of find every time every weekend I used to spend in a different house from the age of 14 already. So coming from a family that is not very into my routine, now I understand that it's not something that was very obvious for me to be an Olympian. I don't think I have dreamt on it when I was younger. It kind of grew on me.
Fascinating. So there were even additional obstacles you had to overcome. Andy,
Yeah.
how about your experience? And if you can also speak to maybe some of the role models who helped and inspired you along the way.
Yeah, so I moved to Israel 6 years ago, and that was when I became a professional swimmer. And it was just an amazing experience. Like you had introduced, I went to the Maccabiah Games and just felt so welcome in Israel that I decided to move there. And I just felt so much support along the way. I think I had a pretty different experience from Vered. But right when I entered the National Sport Institute in Israel, I just felt so welcome, and everyone was excited that I was there. And I think that also obviously came from when I was younger as well. And so I kind of grew up in a sports family where my parents would drive me to practice every morning and were so supportive. And all of my extended family was always watching and trying to come to swim meets whenever they could. And I think even going off of role models, my mom owns her own business. And so I always saw very empowered women when I was growing up. And I think that really had an influence on me to know that I could succeed in anything that I wanted to. My grandma was also very strong and always loved my swimming ambitions, but inspired me to also, have a career after swimming. And that's sort of a reason why I started medical school, just to sort of have an easier transition from sport into the rest of my life. And so I just feel like I've always had a lot of support. I've gotten support from Meredith, from Athena, and from Vered, from the Olympic Committee. And, everyone who has come before me in Israeli sports has just shown that you can succeed. And if you work hard, you will have a great experience.
I love that. I love that some of your role models and mentors and supporters are here on the panel with us today. And that's incredible. We were talking before we went live about, we were talking to Danielle about what's happening with the NBA under COVID. And of course, COVID is a big conversation around the world. But what's interesting are the challenges that have always been there that COVID has exposed and that we're now aware of and talking about. And one of the things, especially for working women, are the unique challenges when it comes to childcare. And Diana, I want to turn to you on this. Can you talk about what it's like? And I think this is, of course, unique to female athletes, what it's like to be a player and a mother.
Well, of course, for every athlete, it's going to be quite different. And I think depending on what country you're from, then it's going to even be more different. So it wasn't something I had in mind as, I got to prove to everybody that I can do this. Before I even got pregnant, it kind of wasn't something in my brain that was possible. There wasn't a whole lot of role models. you weren't seeing it quite often. And if you were seeing it, it was just like this very dramatic story behind it where it's so difficult. And I think the first inkling was on ESPN. They had a story about Sarah Brown, who's a runner, and it was called Run Mama Run. And I remember watching it, and she had this real combination of, she had so much hate from people online, like, how could you dare think to be pregnant and run? How could you work out? Like, and then this combination of like, you're an athlete, you have so much drive. Why is this such a big issue? So there's always those two sides. While you're pregnant, you know, am I really doing something wrong? Is this crazy? People are making me feel crazy, when in reality, it's not as complicated. And I realized that after that, it's really, I'm just a human being carrying a baby and actually just working out appropriately. And we'll just return to play after. It sounds really simple, but in the moment, it's really hard to kind of distinguish that with so much of society telling you you're doing something wrong for some reason. So depending on which country you're in, you know, the US, I know FIFA just passed some mandatory maternity leave. The NWSL Players Association and the US Women's National Team, they have some discrepancies. They're still working on that. I know the WNBA passed some pretty wonderful maternity leave as well, but there's still, you know, if you want to be breastfeeding, if you want your kid around, if you are a single mother, if you are not one of the players on the national team, it can be a really big struggle. Along with being afraid to ask for help if you are suffering from postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, if you have any other medical conditions. So there's a lot that can kind of stack up. And without the right support, it can feel quite overwhelming.
Danielle, I know early in your career, you represented some of the women from the US soccer team, you know, kind of referencing what Diana was talking about. Did you see things different in the US? I mean, is it a question of the US, or is it a question of kind of the level of the US women's soccer team?
I think Diana touched on all of the really important factors that play into this. I don't know that it's necessarily, you know, a US thing or by country as much as by federation and organization. And I think the leadership of an organization, and that's across the board, sets the tone for these kinds of issues. And culture, I talk a lot about culture in NBA franchises and how much culture plays a role in the success of an organization. And I think that's definitely true here. I think with the US women's soccer team, you know, they kind of were the leaders in that sport internationally because of their early success with the '99 World Cup. And even before that, in 1994, Joy Fawcett became the first female soccer player in the US to have a child mid-career. And she went on to play another 10 years after that. And there are many women after her from US soccer who continued on their careers. I think all of the points that Diana made are very important and things that people need to consider that men don't even think about, obviously, when they're professional athletes. But it's just, Diana touched on a really important thing. It's really your support network. But I think, like I said, connecting that to the organization and the leadership within that organization, because oftentimes that support can come from within the organization and should. With the US soccer team back then, 99, 2003 World Cup, they talked a lot about how their teammates were their nannies, were, you know, the aunts to their children, helped raise their children. And, you know, they brought their kids with them to training camp and on the road and, you know, all over the world. And that was something that was just the norm because they were seeing so much of it with that particular team. But I think, you know, it varies from team to team and organization to organization. But that is one of the many things I think that goes into this notion of culture and the tone that you're setting from the top all the way down, you know, to all the employees and to the athletes within an organization. And when you set, you know, when you have a culture of inclusiveness and you're giving the tools to your athletes they need to be successful on the field and on the court, then, you know, everything else falls into place. But in, you know, you have to consider all of these off field and off court variables that oftentimes are overlooked in order to see that success translate to the court and the field.
Diana, now in your role as working as a sports psychologist, what are you advising some of the athletes? What are you hearing? I mean, is there anything in that kind of unique role now on the other side of things?
Yeah, it can be. So players now that I work with who did have a child or who are getting pregnant, they have a lot of concerns. If they're not a national team player, if they're not, let's say like an Alex Morgan, where, everyone is in love with the fact that she's pregnant and it's like this return. But for players who don't have that security, there's a lot of anxiety. I'm afraid to tell anyone I'm pregnant. And then I'm afraid, I'm going to push myself too hard and come back early because I'm so worried that my spot is going to be taken. So there's a lot of conversation around that, and just a lot of anxiety is increased about what happens after I have the baby, who's going to watch the baby, what if I have complications, what if I need a C-section. These are all questions that the coach, really has no idea about, but there's no one there to just support them. So a lot of the athletes that I work with now, it's a lot of family planning. It's a lot of work on anxiety, just managing that and being aware of what could happen realistically, because athletes are not immune to postpartum depression, postpartum OCD, postpartum anxiety, psychosis even. So just a lot of psychoeducation on, here are the things that you should look out for. Here are ways to kind of care for yourself. Here's the ways to look out for your body so you don't injure yourself trying to come back so soon. And then here are all the people that you can connect with. Here's, make sure you know your rights as a player coming back to the league. What is your contract? What's the maternity policy? All of that stuff, being really on top of it. And being just, here's the reality of the situation. We're not going to shy away that this is where we're at. We would love to be somewhere else. We would love for this to be the greatest scenario, but that's not the reality right now. So we have to work with what we have and be aware of kind of pitfalls that can happen. So I do a little bit of like the ACT work, where like this is acceptance and kind of commitment to what your situation is and how can we work from there. So those are the athletes that are pregnant. And then there's also a lot of athletes who are just before that. I'm not even pregnant yet, but it's on my mind. Okay, I just want to have the conversation. What does this even entail? This seems like a lot. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe it's too overwhelming. What if I don't come back the same player? These are all things that actually can happen and have to be taken into consideration.
Fascinating. Things that we don't even really think about. By the way, speaking of moms, I see that Andy's mom just gave a little shout out in the chat to say how proud she is. Merav, I think this is the perfect time to turn to you when we're talking about, especially what female athletes need to succeed in terms of support. I wonder if you could explain the work of Athena, especially your efforts to build a safe space in sports and prevent sexual harassment. But before you answer, I believe we have a video that from Athena that showcases some work.
Yeah.
Let's go to the videotape.
כשאני מבשלת עם אבא שלי, תכלס הוא זה שעובד. אח שלי תמיד קורא אותי בדמקה.
Oh, actually, I think we have a little problem. All right, it's a little technical glitch, but we'll get back to it. Merav, why don't you go ahead and start talking about Athena's work, and hopefully the video will appear.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having us in this very important session and the webinar. Actually, Athena is the National Center to Advancing Women in Sport, and we are part of Wingate Institute, which is the Institute for Excellence in Israel, located very nearby Netanya. And Athena started in 2007. Actually, the Minister of Culture, Sports, and Education started, and the vision at the beginning was to change the Israeli sports culture, both socially and as to a gender thinking, in order to ensure the full participation of girls and women in all fields of sports and also in all levels. So this was the main vision. Then we had three main goals. And one of the goals, or the first goal, was to increase the number of grassroots participants, girls, in all sports. The secondly, even nationally, worldwide, and this is something I would like to tell about one of our projects, also to create an and promote female leadership in sports. And one of the third one, which I don't know if it's not the most important, is to change the social thinking about the importance of sports, significant factor in training and shaping each of every girl. And especially about this goal, I would like to speak about two of our projects. One of them is called Athena Ambassadors, and also Meredith, as an Olympic athlete, she's one of our ambassadors. And the idea, we have 30 best athletes in all sports, and we train and teach them how to express and tell their story to everyone. Actually, everyone in Israel can invite Meredith or each other of our ambassadors. It's free of charge, and they're giving their story, not their speech, their story about what was their difficulties, how they started, was it easier? For example, we have one of our Athena ambassadors, she was a football player. And is it easier to be a football girl player? And when all the neighborhood said, football, it's only for boys or something like that. So this is one of the projects. Secondly, you said about the sexual harassment program we're having, we called it safety area in sport and protecting the child. And what we are giving now, and we're putting officers in every sport federation, in every sports body. We have an officer who already trained what to do. And the idea and the continuous of this program that every sport club and every sport team will have officer. This is something we are working with the European Union. They support us and helping us how to build the regulation, how to make sure that every girl and boy, every coach will be safe, and to understand that the sports society is total pure and doing sport only.
I have to say, Meredith, about Merav told about the ambassador project, and it's a crazy thing that it's the athlete is supposed to be the role model for the young athletes. But I have to say that for me, this project was like a cure, because it made me forced me to deal with some issues that I had with my story, with my coach, with my eating disorders, with all the difficulties that I had as an athlete. But telling the story over and over and answering questions and thinking about the way that I did, it was such a good experience for me. And looking back I started almost 10 years. I started 10 years ago. It made me, I think, a better woman today.
That's why we talk about that a lot at JWI too in our mentoring programs. The assumption is that the mentor is the one teaching the mentee, but how much we get back from working with younger women. That's so sustaining. Someone, Susan, who's watching today, just put into the chat her experience as a young athlete and how at first she played basketball and they didn't get the same kind of facilities that the boys teams did, and how that then changed. And I'm wondering if any of you can speak to that of kind of the progress you've seen over the years from when you started playing to now, whether it's in facilities or coaching or support or whatever is now going to female athletes, that you're seeing progress.
I will start because I have a very short answer. When speaking about an Olympic sport, I think the image can be a little bit, how do you say, Andy? Help me with the English. It's not a precise picture of all sports in Israel, because in the Olympic sports, the athlete is like a business owner, and he receives scholarships from the Olympic Committee according to his achievements. So it's exactly the same for women and men. the same opportunities, the same funds, the same money, the same facilities. Everything is the same. Misleading. Thank you. Someone help me here. And also the percentage of women that participate in the Olympic Games, it's a little bit more than 50%. So it looks like a perfect picture for the female in Israeli sports. But I think when you look at the whole picture of the sports in Israel and you look about the funds that the municipalities divide, or the time in the facilities, or perceptions, or when you look at the number of sexual harassments, or when you look about the female leadership in sport, or the number of coaches, women coaches, you start to see the gaps. It's a concern of us. In the Olympic Committee, we are trying really hard to encourage women coaches and also female leadership. But definitely, I think it's something that has to start. It has to be like Athena, a government initiative that starts from the bottom. Because the National Olympic Committee in Israel is definitely doing a great job, but I think it's just it's so in the top of the pyramid that it's not doing the big change that is so needed.
Thank you for
I
that.
think this is, Meredith, sorry, Meredith. I think exactly what Fered says, this is part of what Athena's project doing. We have many projects, as I said, also in with the Olympic Committee, with the Sports Association. But I think one of the most important project is with the municipalities. The idea of giving equal opportunity for girls in municipality, especially not in the center, especially in different society, maybe with the religions, maybe with the Arab society, maybe with the suburbs, with the very far suburbs. I will tell you a story. 4 years ago, or actually maybe 5 years ago, when I came to Athena, I look at our project map and I find out that most of our projects are in the center of the country, north, and very, very little in the south. When I went to the municipality and find out how come they didn't even apply. We are sponsoring projects. Please apply to a project. Please show us what you can do for the girls in your municipality, in your city or kibbutz or whatever. And we realized that the parents didn't want to give the girls to go and practice in the late hours, mainly in the south. Remember that close to Gaza Strip, if they didn't have any safety rooms close to the sports facilities, it was dangerous for the parents. So we ask every project to put the practice time immediately after school day. It's like after school activities, and give the facilities for the girls, for the little girls. Make sure you give them the equal opportunity, even extra than the boys.
I think that's great. And I understand that the video is now working. So I just want to quickly
Go for it.
show that quickly.
כשאני מבשלת עם אבא שלי, תכלס הוא זה שעובד. אח שלי תמיד קורא אותי בדמקה. בכיתה לפעמים אני חולמת. כן, רות? אבל כשיש לי קרב חשוב, או יריבה קשה, אני אומרת לעצמי, טוב רות, עכשיו את חייבת לנצח.
לא משנה מה תבחרי. כשאת עושה ספורט, את תמיד מנצחת.
I love that. I tell myself, Ruth, you must
وكنايس حلوة. أغلب البنات بيلعبوا كرة السلة. אבל לא אני. أنا وكلود المقدمات الوحيدات في الفريق. لما أنا بكون بالملعب هي بتكون لاعبة الاحتياط. والعكس تماما. المهم إنه عنا نفس الهدف. الفوز بالبطولة.
לא משנה מה תבחרי. כשאת עושה ספורט, את תמיד מנצחת. אתנה.
בכל יום אני מסתכלת החוצה, בודקת מי יש רוח. ברגע שנגמר השיעור, אני כבר בים. זה הבית השני שלי. גם ככה חצי מהמשפחה שלי פה. בתחרויות אני בדרך כלל מנצחת. אבל כשאני לא, אומרים לי, אלה, מה קרה? לא הגעת ראשונה. באמת? לא שמתי לב. זה רק מחזק אותי. בשיעוט הבא, אני עוקפת את כולם.
לא משנה מה תבחרי. כשאת עושה ספורט, את תמיד מנצחת. אתנה.
היי, אני נועה. זה החדר שלי.
ושלי.
ושלו. זה הגיבור שלי, הסגנון שלי, המדליות שלי, החברות הכי טובות שלי, המוזיקה שלי, הפסטה בולונז של אבא שלי, וזאת? זאת האהבה הכי גדולה שלי.
לא משנה מה תבחרי. כשאת עושה ספורט, את תמיד מנצחת. אתנה.
Wonderful. Thank you. Those are very inspiring. Danielle, I want to turn to you for a couple of points. As the only woman NBA agent, you are quite often, if not always, the only woman in the room. I'm wondering if you can kind of speak to more women getting into the business side of sports.
Sure. Well, I just want to say that, and I know, Meredith, you have heard this story before, but I did not realize that I was the only female certified agent with active clients in the NBA at the time. By the way, now, as of today, there are more. But a few years ago, a journalist from the Washington Post called me to ask if she could do a feature on me as the only female agent in the NBA with active clients. And that was news to me. And instead of feeling like that was an accomplishment, I was actually pretty upset about it, pretty disappointed and surprised that there weren't more. I had never really paid attention to that aspect of it before, but yes, most of the time I am the only female in the room at a negotiating table or in a recruiting meeting with a college athlete we're looking to sign to represent as he transitions to the NBA. But I never really thought about it in the moment or paid attention to it because I always knew that I was adding value to the particular conversation and that I deserved to be there. And so I never really made it an issue. You know, being at a table full of men and being the only female, I feel that, you know, I acted in a way I would have acted male or female, or no matter what the circumstances were, that I had the qualifications, the experience, and the talent to be there. The key was that it took probably a lot longer than it perhaps took some male counterparts to ascend in my career and to be successful. And there were often times where I was quiet at a table filled with men just to make sure that I wasn't trying so hard to add to the conversation and to prove my value and to prove that I deserve to be there. And I think the key is authenticity and to really always remain true to who you are. And so in doing that, I made sure not to talk too much, not to talk just to talk early on in my career, but to really add value, only to speak up when I had something I know would really add value to the conversation and would be kind of like what I call like a mic drop, where I could say something that would really kind of, you know, be a wow factor in the conversation and would leave a mark and leave a lasting memory in the minds of the owner, the NBA team owners, general managers with whom I was dealing. And so, you know, it took time. I have been in the industry now for 20 years. In the earlier part of my career, I focused more in marketing and athlete endorsements. And then it's been over a decade now, about 12 or 13 years, that I've been certified as an agent. And now I think, yes, to answer your question, definitely more and more women are becoming certified. There are more women as certified agents in other sports as well. And there have been over the years. But, you know, I think it's more about, and also this goes back to what we were talking about in terms of childcare and having, you know, professional athletes, female athletes having children during their career. I think part of why it was something that was more accepted and more, it was part of the conversation for the U.S. women's soccer team because they had so many people doing it, and it was more of the norm. I think with anything in life, when you have someone who is a trailblazer, the first to do something, whatever it is, something which was thought to be unreachable before just becomes a benchmark, and then people surpass it. I always go to the example of Roger Bannister, who in 1954 was the first person to run a mile in under 4 minutes. And people thought that was humanly impossible before he did it. And he did it one day in 1954. And the following month, an Australian runner beat his record. And within the next 3 years, another 15 people around the world were able to run the mile in under 4 minutes. And I think that just shows that you have to shift. It shifts your entire paradigm of what is possible when you have to, when you see something that you didn't think was possible before, and you have to see it to believe it. And I think I never wanted to make being the only female at the time a few years ago in the NBA with active clients, my legacy, certainly wasn't something that defined me as a person or defined my career path, really. I considered myself the same level as my male counterparts. But if in some small way it, opened doors for future, amazing women to come and do an even better job than I have, then it's certainly worthwhile and worth talking about. There are plenty of women on the business side of sport, and there have been for many years, but previously you saw more women in marketing and PR roles, and kind of client service and support roles. And to get to more like upper management, general managers, presidents, agents, those types of leadership roles, I think we've come a really long way, but we certainly have a ways to go. But you'll see now more and more, you have females as, head coaches of professional sports teams, men's teams. You have females in front office roles in Major League Baseball and the NFL. So it's certainly happening more and more now. But obviously, I think we still have a ways to go.
Wasn't it just this past year that we got our first woman coach in the NFL also? She's not a head coach yet, right. And in the NBA, same thing a few years ago. Actually, a good friend of mine, Becky Hammond, was the first top assistant coach for an NBA team. So we're almost there. And then actually a baseball team this year, just a few months ago, hired the first female general manager. So it's happening. It's definitely happening, and more to come. Absolutely. Since
didn't Becky Hannon she just coached also when the coach got
exactly. So Popovich got kicked out of a game recently, and she took over as the head. So technically, she has now head coached in one game, but she doesn't have the official title yet of a head coach in the NBA.
I also want to ask you, since you're quite often the one at the negotiating tables, I feel like I would be remiss if we had this webinar and I didn't talk about pay equity in sports. It's something I know that the U.S. Women's Olympic ice hockey team, the U.S. Women's soccer team really brought up as an issue. Danielle, can you speak to that a little bit, especially in your unique role?
Sure. I have a few answers to that question. I think the person who commented in the chat, and then you shared with everyone about how hard it was playing basketball growing up, and the resources that female athletes, youth athletes, did not have compared to their male counterparts. That always was, and probably still is, an issue. I think there's a difference between gender equity in sport, like when Title IX came about, and that's an ongoing issue in terms of resources, support, opportunities that female athletes have. But I think that is a separate issue from equal pay. And from, I'm seeing it through the lens of strictly a business perspective. And in that sense, because of Me Too and the great momentum that we have in the world right now around supporting women, it's wonderful to see that the female ice hockey players and then the U.S. women's soccer players really, went to battle to try to fight for equal pay. But through that business lens, you truly have to understand all of the variables that go into this. And so for the female soccer players in particular, when they're demanding equal pay, are they demanding equal pay to the U.S. men's soccer players? You have to understand that when you're comparing things in business, are you comparing apples to apples? There are business implications associated with pay, obviously. With an athlete's salary is directly tied to a business's bottom line. So there's sponsorship dollars, there's revenues that you're generating, and that's basically like saying, if we have a female neurosurgeon and we want to say now that this male nurse is coming in and they deserve equal pay but it's really, honestly, that's an extreme example, but that's really what it comes down to. Are we comparing the same things? In the NBA, to determine the players' salaries and the players' cut of the business, we have something called BRI, basketball related income. And it's a very complex formula that goes into, how they determine the bottom line at the end of each year, and then they divide it amongst the teams and the players. And so in women's soccer, they're not making the same, you're not comparing the exact same thing because ticket costs are different, sponsorship dollars are different. Oftentimes people would say the same thing, make the same argument about the NBA versus the WNBA, but they have a completely different business model. You have to really figure out as a business, what does success look like? What are your goals? Are we hitting our benchmarks? So if we want to sell out an arena, are we selling out 50,000 person arena or a 6,000 person arena? And so the numbers are not going to be the same. And in US soccer alone, yes, they came off a very successful World Cup run, and that's why they wanted to kind of go back and ask for more money, because the sponsorship dollars were there and there was some traction and certainly some global support of the team. So as soon as they won, everyone's chanting equal pay, equal pay. But when we say equal, what are we comparing it to? Number one. And number two, more importantly, in terms of really understanding all of the factors, the US women's soccer team has a collective bargaining agreement with US Soccer Federation. And just like the NBA's Players Association does with the NBA and so on and so forth, every league, there has to be some governing body and some rules by which they govern. And the US women's soccer team had a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement in place with the US Soccer Federation. They had agreed to a new one either a year and a half or a year or two prior to this past summer when they went back and wanted to ask for more money. And there's a reason why they have certain processes in place and why they go about it a certain way. And then they wanted to go back, oh, we changed our mind. Now we think we deserve more money. We need to, because it's not equal to what our male counterparts are getting. Well, maybe they're right, maybe they're not, but they should have made the argument when they had the chance. And as much as I support women's soccer, of course, and want them to make more money, you really have to understand that there's a process in place for a reason. And when the next CBA is up, I'm sure they'll go back and they'll be able to get more. But that's why we have that in place. And again, it's also formulas that go into it that are directly tied to the business, and the profitability of a business.
Fascinating. Thank you for that insight. So we're going to open it up to Q&A now, and I know there are a couple questions already loading up, but while we're waiting for those questions to come, Andy, I want to turn to you. So hopefully we will all be cheering you on and many other athletes this summer. But from the athlete's perspective, what would you wish we all understood, those of us cheering from our couches, as well as what was it like for the games to have been postponed? What does that mean for an athlete? So
yeah, I mean, I think everyone's experience with the games being postponed was different. But for me, there was some time where everything had shut down already and we didn't know if the games were going to be postponed. So we had to continue training and find access to facilities. And I think that was a very stressful couple of weeks. And so honestly, the postponement was kind of a relief. At least at that time, it was kind of like, okay, now we can focus on health and focus on what's going on and making sure that everyone is safe. And for me personally, I think the postponement has really helped. It's allowed me to sort of reset and have extra time to train. Because I was in medical school, I wasn't training full time for 2 years. And so this is actually giving me extra time to prepare. And I'm training really well now that pools are more accessible. Obviously, there's still some difficulty and we can't travel to compete, which is very important leading up to the Olympics. But just in general, I have more time to train and I'm training really well. So I'm very excited for this summer. And being part of the 2016 Olympics was an amazing experience. We had 4 females on the team, and like you had mentioned before, we had a relay for the first time. So that was super exciting. I really liked that sort of team camaraderie that we had. And just being in the village was really exciting. My favorite part was being in the dining hall and seeing all of the other athletes and being able, you know, I'm not super familiar with other athletes. And so I always thought it was funny when there would be a huge crowd around certain athletes and I'd have to ask my teammate, oh, who is that? And, you know, we try to guess who was in each sport. And so it was just like a really fun experience. And I had a great time and I'm really looking forward to Tokyo. I hope that people are allowed in to watch. The spectator experience, I know, is a big part of it. But I'm just, you know, excited. Hopefully everyone can watch online or there will be some way to have it be an interactive experience.
So I always love, you know, when the athletes all march into the big stadium at the beginning of the games. And then of course at the end when they walk in and, you know, it goes from that, the first time of feeling so serious and they're marching so, you know, together. And then at the end, it's like this big party and celebration. And what's it like to be part of that group walking in and just, I can't even imagine, but.
Yeah, so actually because swimming is the first week of the games, I wasn't able to participate in opening ceremonies. I know that that is like a really special experience, but we competed in our relay the following day, so I wasn't able to participate, but I did really like closing ceremonies because I do feel like it was a big celebration. And, you know, everyone, yeah, like exactly like you said, everyone marched in as their own nation together. And then sort of after you sit wherever you want, you're walking around while the ceremonies are happening. So it was just really fun. You can trade pins or uniforms. It was all a very fun experience.
Amazing. Well, now it's going to be exciting watching and being like, I talked to her. Yay. So Meredith, we have a question I think you might be the best to answer. Is you were talking about your experience coming from a more religious or traditional family. Are there limits to how far a religious woman can compete athletically? What are, you know, what?
So I have to say that the opening ceremony for the Olympic Games, it's the closest thing you can get to a rock star moment. You have like electricity in your body, and this is one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. So recommended if you can. And Tokyo Games are going to be awesome for the Israeli Olympic team since it's going to be the biggest one ever. A little bit more than 85 athletes, and so it's going to be very exciting, and it's happening. So this is already a good thing in COVID time. About the religious, first of all, I'm personally, I'm not a religious athlete. Just to be clear, I'm completely, my family is like the whole spectrum of religious. I am the most secular. My brother is Orthodox, and everyone is in the middle. But definitely there are limitations, and it's also kind of an issue in Israel because of the Shabbat, and because of some of the games, some of the sports are played in Shabbat, so it became an issue. And also I went to the Knesset to speak about it. I think if people would like to really solve the problem, it would be very easy just to move to make Sunday a rest day. and then all the problems are gone. But I think there are a few forces in Israel that prefer to keep it complicated. Since most of the facilities in Israel, they have a light issue, so you cannot play at night. Some of the sports you need a whole day, like sailing, like cycling. Also, sometimes soccer. If you don't have light, you cannot play. So there are some issues about it, and that is the reason. Also, you need volunteers. So this is the reason why you have to play on Shabbat. And then, if you're a religious athlete, you cannot participate. And I think as a young girl or a young boy that you like sports and you want to compete it in higher level, and you know that you are religious and you cannot do it, you don't have motivation and you feel like it's not for you. And I really, really hope that in the future we will see the Olympic team as more as the Israeli society, more variety. More people that are coming from the north and from the south, more religious, more Arabics, more of everything. And I think that's something that we are definitely speaking everywhere, anywhere someone wants to hear it, because this is definitely, I can say more women because we are more than 50%, which is good, but more variety, definitely. And the religious population in Israel still we need to find a solution, because it's not only that, and there are also cultural obstacles for the religious population to practice sports high level. So at least we will give them the opportunity.
Well, I have to say there was a woman who's watching who is Muslim, Somali, and she said that as someone who is fighting for rights of women and girls to play sports, that this conversation is giving her hope for all women doing the same thing. And she says, thank you all. And I echo her thanks to all of you for sharing your wisdom with us today. I thank you all for watching and for being a part of this, and of course to the AIFL for hosting. So with that, Ruby, I want to turn to you to close things out.
Thank you, Meredith. And I want to thank all the participants, the panelists. This was remarkable. I felt that you sharing your personal experiences was really something very unique. And all the obstacles that you are going through, you went through, you're going through, it's really, and all the challenges, it's very, very impressive. So thank you very, very much. I want, on behalf of the AIFL, I want to thank all of you. I want to, as I said before, we have 2 webinars a week. Our next webinar is on this coming Sunday. I think it's January 17th. It has to do also with sports. It's about football, both about leagues, about players and coaches. So please join us on Sunday at 7 p.m. Israel time, 12 noon Eastern time. We are all looking forward to having you with us again. Thank you and have a good day. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.